Hey everyone, Dan here. I'm an engineer at Interval, and I want to give you a quick demo of how I'm using Interval in one of my personal projects. So I've been refreshing my personal site, and something I've always wanted to have is a bookmark section where I can post links to things that I'm reading right now. So my typical stack these days is React and Remix for the front end, Tailwind for styling, Prisma for the ORM, and for the backend UI, I'm using Interval. Interval is a low-code tool for generating web UIs from your backend. It is not a drag and drop UI builder. In fact, Interval is specifically for people like me who prefer to code. There's a lot of platforms out there these days like Retool and Superblocks that let you build UIs without writing any front-end code. And we get it, setting up front-end UIs isn't always fun, even if you know what you're doing. I've been doing front-end for over a decade, and I'm kind of tired of doing the same stuff over and over again. So Interval solves the same problem, no front-end coding, but in a much different way. So let me take a few minutes and show you what it's like to build a quick web UI for managing my bookmarks with Interval. So the main thing to know about Interval is that everything is generated with code, and all of that code runs in your app's backend. If I go into the Interval dashboard here, this is my production environment for the live site. We'll switch over to development. There's nothing here yet. So let's go into VS Code here and write some code alongside the rest of my app. This is the code base for my personal site. I'm using Remix, and here on the bookmarks page, I'm loading the bookmarks from the backend with Prisma, but we need a way to create those bookmarks. So let's use Interval to do this. So in my Interval folder in my backend, I have this index file, and it starts the Interval listener. It has my API key, and we're going to use file-based routing, which means that setting up forms is as easy as creating a file in the file system. So let's go over to the routes folder, and we'll create a new file called bookmarks/create.ts. This is going to be our form for creating a bookmark. So we'll import the action class from Interval. We'll give it a name, and we'll add the handler. And we'll export this. Now, actions in Interval are just async functions. Think of it as a conversational Node script. When you await input, the script pauses execution until we receive input from the user. So if we look at the schema, for bookmarks, we need a title, a URL, an optional description, and status. So let's collect that info from Interval. We're going to use the io.group method, which groups inputs together on the screen. So we'll do title, do URL. For description, we'll use the rich text method, which will give us a nice rich text editor. And we'll make that optional. And for status, we'll use the select.single method. And we'll import status options, which I already have defined somewhere else. Bookmark can be either a draft or published. And finally, let's write this data to the database using Prisma. So we will await prisma.bookmark.create, and we'll add title, URL, description, and status. All right, let's see this in action. We have to start our interval listener, so we'll go yarn dev interval. Let's switch over to the browser, and we've got our bookmarks folder here. So we'll click into here, we'll go into create bookmark, and here's our form. Now this is completely generated from my backend. This form didn't exist a minute ago. I didn't pre-build this. And we've got validation, we've got a rich text editor. It's insanely easy to set this up. So what's happening here when we see this form? Like I said, this is a conversational Node script. The UI is talking to my backend. We are currently awaiting input from this group. And once we receive the input and the user clicks continue, we'll move on and create the data in Prisma. So let's add a bookmark. And we'll make this a draft. So we click continue, and we've got our bookmark. But we need a way to view the bookmarks we already have. So let's go back to our code editor and set up an index file. Instead of an action, we're going to import the page class from Interval. Pages are the second type of screen you can create with Interval. While actions are typically for reading and writing data, pages are just for displaying output. So let's set that up. And let's export that too. The handler is just an async function, so let's fetch the data from Prisma. And we'll return the layout class. Let's add one menu item. We'll add a link to the form for creating a bookmark. And for the children, we'll use one of the display methods to output a table. For data, we'll just feed the array of bookmarks in from Prisma. And let's customize the columns. So we'll include title, URL, status, and created at. And let's add a drop-down menu to each item so you can edit or delete the bookmark. And let's include the ID of the bookmark so we know which one to edit. And let's add a delete button too. All right, let's save it and go back to the browser. And now we've got a table. Once again, in just a few lines of code on my backend, we have a table in the browser. I'm sure some of you have spent tons of time coding tables, sorting, filtering, pagination, responsive layouts. You get all of this with Interval and without writing any front-end code, and without clicking your mouse a million times to set it up in a no-code tool. Each of these rows has a drop-down menu where we can edit or delete the bookmark. We still need to write those actions, and I'm not going to do that here, but there's one more thing I want to show you, and this is why Interval is just so awesome. With Interval and TypeScript, you get full type safety. What does that mean? Let's go into my Prisma schema, and let's make description non-optional. If you aren't familiar with Prisma, Prisma generates TypeScript types for your entire database according to this schema. So let's regenerate our Prisma types. And immediately, our create action, the file has turned red. There's a TypeScript error in this file. The compiler caught it. That's because description is optional in our interval form, but it's required in the database. So let's remove the optional method from description, and the error goes away. Guys, this is not something you get with no-code apps. You change your backend, update some types, suddenly your no-code app breaks without a warning. It's a mess. This is not the case with Interval. We've got full type safety out of the box. So that's Interval. Like I said at the beginning, as engineers, we have our toolbox, whether it's React or Vue, Remix, Tailwind, Prisma. And for these quick, effortless web UIs, Interval is my go-to now. I've been using it on a ton of projects. It saves me a ton of time. It keeps me in my flow as a developer. I don't have to go dragging and dropping and clicking around a UI builder to make this stuff. I can just write code. We recently updated our pricing. All the core features of Interval are completely free to use, so go check it out, and I hope you enjoyed this look at Interval.